of the coaches that the Jaguars have requested to interview. Quite a few different names on this list that they're planning on trying to catch up with. So far, they've already talked to a handful of them, but Joe Brady in the playoffs, Liam Cohen in the playoffs, actually playing like right now, Brian Flores, playoff. Aaron Glenn, playoff. Patrick Graham was actually on a Raiders staff that was relieved. Then there's Ben Johnson, playoffs. Todd Monken, playoffs. Kellen Moore, playoffs. Robert Saleh was fired by the Jets earlier this year, but since the Jets regressed after he was gone, maybe a vote of confidence for him. Steve Spagnuolo, also a playoff coordinator. So a lot of coaches that are kind of currently involved in the postseason. So that's going to kind of slow down the search just a little bit, since you kind of got to wait for them to be done before you can move along. Now, let's move ahead here and talk about the guys that the Jaguars have already interviewed. So here's a look at the 4 interviews the Jaguars have already done. 3 of these came on Saturday. So the Jaguars were busy over the weekend. Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson both interviewed on Saturday, early, late, and then Patrick Graham also had his interview on Saturday, and then Spags had his interview on Friday. So let's talk a little bit about each one of these guys. So Patrick Graham has kind of been an up-and-coming defensive coordinator, not surprised. He got some interviews last year, a second go-around. Now, the tough thing is that he was on a Raiders staff that was just dismissed, but he's still highly regarded around the league. I would be shocked if he is a finalist for this job, though, just because he was just fired in Las Vegas. Now, 2 of the guys that I really like for this job, Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn. They're both the Detroit Lions coordinators. Ben Johnson's the offensive coordinator that everybody wants. Look, he's probably the most popular candidate for this job and most of the openings around the league right now. Look, Ben Johnson is the hot shot for a reason. He has that Lions offense humming. It's one of the most dangerous ones in the league. And look, there's no way around it. Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator for the Lions, has also been doing some good things. He's also a former Jaguars player. And then there's Steve Spagnuolo, who has that Chiefs defense winning a lot of games for this Kansas City this year. So I mentioned it. The front runner for the job's got to be Ben Johnson, right? This is the guy that we've been talking about for months. If Doug Peterson moved on, he's the belle of the ball. Everybody wants him. Many of the openings around the league, teams, fan bases are all fingers crossed that Ben Johnson picks them. Will he pick Jacksonville? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see ultimately what he's looking for. He turned down head coaching opportunities just a year ago because he said he didn't feel like they were the right fit. So Shad Khan, Trent Baalke have to convince him that Jacksonville is the right fit. Now, as you try and work through this whole thing, I've been kind of thinking about, is it the right fit for Ben Johnson? Is this the spot that he's going to ultimately pick to be the next head coach? And as I kind of started to work through some of the stuff, I think my perspective on what I expect from this coaching search started to kind of slightly change. Here, we talked to Shad Khan earlier this week, and this is something that he said that kind of stuck in my memory for a while.
We are the most predictable team on both sides of the ball, okay? And football, to win, deception is a big part of it, unpredictability. If you know exactly what we're going to do on offense or defense, you better have the 22 best players to help us win a football game. So being unpredictable is, I think, is modern football, and, we have to be able to show that on the field.
So you hear that from Shad, and my immediate thought goes to, he's going to pick a young, innovative, offensive-minded coach, right? Ben Johnson checks those boxes. And there are a handful of other coaches on the list that would also check those boxes. A guy like Joe Brady up in Buffalo doing some innovative, offensive-minded things. Look, I do think Shad has a point there. The Jaguars were a predictable team at times, but the way you get around predictable is if you have better players. Every week you're not going to have the best 11 players on the field, but so I understand where he's going. I kind of understand the spirit of the answer. So that led me to think, it's got to be Ben Johnson. Is it Ben Johnson or bust, or one of these offensive-minded coaches or bust? And then I kind of also have changed my opinion. Even though I think that's where he's leaning, I might think a different fit. So as the guys were cleaning out the locker room, this soundbite from Tank Bigsby caught my attention. What kind of leader do you think this team needs going into next year?
We just need our own standard. We just need our own identity, who we are, and build that and hold each other accountable for good, bad, and move on from it, and just flush stuff and don't harp on it and go out and play ball. What we're here to do.
A standard. That's what the Jaguars need. They need a culture of winning. Look, we've talked about it. Fans, you've lived through it. The Jaguars have had a culture of not succeeding for a long time. It's been struggles here. They need someone who can come in and set the culture. They need someone who can come in and set a standard. Now, you need a play caller who can help the offense put points on the board, but is that play caller the right leader, the leader that can lead this team to help set that standard, set that culture, and help them to move forward? Frank Frangie, we were chatting on Teal the Show, and he had this to say, and I mean, this is one of the big questions that even the offensive guys have to answer during the interview process.
The question I would have about some of the offensive guys, and I really believe this is, are you going to be a good head coach? Because you're a good play caller, and because you connect with quarterbacks, and because you're a forward thinker offensively, are you a good leader of men? Now, that doesn't mean you're not. Maybe all these guys are. I know Todd Monken pretty well. He's going to be a great leader of men. He's been a head coach at the college level. I can tell you he will be that, and a good offensive mind. I don't know Ben Johnson. I don't know Liam Cohen. I have no reason to believe they're not that, but that's what you have to learn in the interview process. That's what you have to learn when you vet these guys with others around the league is you know they're good offensive minds. Will they be good leaders? And that's a question Shad has got to ask.
That's the question that has to be answered. And like Frank said, look, it's not a fact of saying that Ben Johnson can't be that leader, but the hard question is he that leader? So I started going through some of the candidates, trying to figure out who I was sold on is the leader that can help set that culture, set that standard of toughness, and move this team forward. While Ben Johnson has an opportunity, and he's one of the guys that I think is on the list, it's that other Lions coordinator that I kept coming back to. Aaron Glenn, he's a former player. You listen to him talk, you listen to the guys he's played for, they love this guy. I think Aaron Glenn, in my mind, is the right guy for a team. I think he's going to get a head coaching job. I really like it to be here in Jacksonville because I think he's going to bring that toughness, set that standard, and bring some energy out there to the field, and that's exactly what the Jaguars need. Now, I know Aaron Glenn's not going to be the popular hire. Everybody wants the other Lions coordinator because he's the odd man out, because he's the defensive side of the ball. So the big question, if you're going to hire a coach that's defensive-minded these days, is who's your offensive coordinator going to be? Because you need somebody who's going to call the plays, right? I mean, look at Tampa, for instance. Liam Cohen is one of the finalists, or one of the guys that are going to interview for this Jaguars job. Todd Bowles was kind of on the hot seat. Now Liam Cohen's got him humming, and he's the rock star down there in Tampa that they don't want to see leave. Let's get into head coaching interviews that people are like, wait a minute, we'd rather keep Cohen than keep Bowles. That's the nature of the beast when you're a defensive-minded coach, is that offense is what puts fans in seats. The points on the board is what people see as winning games, but ultimately you need a guy who's going to set the culture. You need a guy who's going to set a standard of excellence, and that's something that the Jaguars honestly haven't had for a long time. This is the guy I'm most confident in that can do it. That doesn't mean Ben Johnson or one of the other offensive guys can't. Just something about Aaron Glenn. I think he's the guy that can communicate with the guys and set that bar. We'll talk about it on the next episode of Teal the Show. Our next episode of the News for Jags podcast. Actually, we wrapped up Teal the Show for the year. Can't believe it. But we'll keep doing these podcasts throughout the entire offseason. Keep you up to date with the head coaching search over there, wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you subscribe while you're there. Or you can head over to newsforjags.com, click on that handy-dandy sports page. Justin Barney and I will argue a little bit about the way the Jaguars should go, but it's always a good time.